and welcome to our second Lunch and Learn webinar. This month we're going to be covering the NADSP competencies of communication and empowerment. And this is Dan Hermrich, and I'm here with my colleague John Raphael.
Hey, Dan, thanks. Hi, everybody. This is John, and we are excited to, there we are. We're excited to do our second installment of Lunch and Learn. And the last one we did, we got a lot of positive response from, and we hope to get a lot of positive response from today's. And I think we're going to talk about two specific competencies today, and I think you'll all, appreciate what we're going to talk about. So that said, real quickly, the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals, for those of you that aren't necessarily familiar with us, we're very mission driven, and our mission is pretty straight ahead. We want to make sure that direct support professionals are the best possible direct support professionals they can be, and we do that by improving practice standards and promoting all kinds of system reform and policy changes. And we want to advance direct support professionals' knowledge, skills, and values, and that's what we do through training, through just like these webinars that we do. And if you take a look at this Venn diagram, it's all we stand for. It's the foundation of our mission and our vision, and it's based on three things. And those three things, which are what we believe are the measures of quality, and the way in which we can, as direct support professionals, provide quality support. We have to have knowledge, we have to have skills, and we have to have a set of values. And these Lunch and Learn webinars that we're doing, the series that we're doing, is really based on that bottom right-hand circle, which is the skills. We're going to talk about the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals competency areas. Today we're going to talk about two specific skills, but we're also going to talk about the CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. They also have a set of competencies which are in line with ours, but bottom line is skills and competencies are critical in the provision of quality support for direct support professionals to do the best they can to help people that they're supporting get great lives. So we also have a definition. And if anybody gets an email from many of the staff members at the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals, we kind of sign off with this. And it is a bit of our mantra, and it's what we strive for every day with our mission at the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals. Quality is defined very simply, not easily done, but the definition is simple. It's defined at the point of interaction between a staff member and a person with a disability, an individual with a disability. And that interaction point right there is what we're all about. And today's webinar is all about that. How do we provide a better point of interaction and a quality point of interaction for direct support professionals through helping DSPs understand communication and what empowerment is. That quote's from our founder, our ideological founder, John F. Kennedy Jr. And we are indebted to him every day for that quote, which drives us. So let's get to the competencies, right, Jim?
All right. Thanks, John.
Sure.
Well, these are our 15 NADSP competency areas, and we feel like these encompass all the skills that a direct support professional needs to create that quality at the point of interaction. And today we're going to really focus on the first two. Competency area 1 is participant empowerment, and competency area 2 is communication. Just two really, really important skill sets for a direct support professional. And as John mentioned, there's also this other competency set out there, the CMS core competency areas, and they also address both communication and empowerment. Communication in this case would be their area 1. Empowerment is paired with advocacy that we'll probably talk about in a future webinar, but those are paired together in area 7. And remember, these CMS competencies are a little different in that they're designed to be cross-sector. They're designed to apply equally well to any type of human service setting. whereas our NADSP competencies are really focused on that intellectual and developmental disabilities field. All right, so let's talk about communication first. What is communication? This is the Webster's dictionary definition, and I think it makes it pretty clear that it's a process of exchanging information. And it's not just in the ways that we normally think about. It's not just through speaking. It's not just through writing. People communicate in many, many different ways. We communicate through facial expressions and eye contact, through body language. Mm-hmm. And really, when we talk about all those things, what we're talking about are behaviors. Human behaviors are a very key form of communication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, Dan, I've heard this, and although it's poor grammar, but human beings cannot not communicate between each other, and
we are. Yeah, exactly. We are just constantly broadcasting to the people around us, whether we realize it or not.
Totally. And I'm a big believer in we're very intuitive beings. You know, we can pick up on so much of another human being's energy, and I think direct support professionals do that all the time, especially when they're supporting people. That oftentimes people with intellectual disabilities have what are considered in society, quote unquote, deficits in communication. But DSPs, despite those deficits, they understand and know what's going on with a person. So
yeah, I think doing new staff orientation for many years, we'd have DSPs without a lot of experience come in. Mm-hmm. And they would say something along the lines of, well, the person that I support doesn't communicate. Mm-hmm. And what they typically meant by that was that they don't communicate using spoken words.
Right.
And the follow-up question to that was usually, well, do you know when they're happy? And they would say, well, yes. Do you know when they're sad? Yes, I can tell when they're sad. And then I'd usually ask something like, do you know when you messed up? Do they let you know when you messed up? And usually you get a laugh there. Yeah, I know when I messed up. Right. And that's all communication. Clearly, there's communication happening there.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so if we get a little more into the language of our NADSP competency areas, this is what we call the overall competency language for Area 2 for communication. The direct support professional should be knowledgeable about the range of effective communication strategies and skills necessary to establish a collaborative relationship with the participant. So there are many, many different modes of human communication. Mm-hmm. As direct support professionals, we need to have some knowledge about those different modes of communication. We need to have a comfort level in using those modes of communication. And the goal is really to establish this collaborative relationship, this partnership with the person that we're supporting. We can't do that without communication.
Yeah, I think I think one of the most important words in that whole sentence right there is relationship. Well, 2 words, collaborative relationship. It's a two-way street. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then if you get into what's called the skill statements, there are several skill statements for this competency area, but I just wanted to focus on one of them that says the competent DSP uses effective, sensitive communication skills to build rapport and channels of communication. And then it says by recognizing and adapting to the range of participant communication styles. So as the professional in this relationship, it's up to us to adapt to the communication styles of the people we're supporting. We're not asking them to adapt to our communication style. We have an obligation to adapt to their communication style and to listen to what they're telling us in the way that they are choosing to communicate it.
Exactly. What about Fred? Do you have a story about Fred?
Yeah, I put that in the blog post that goes along with this this webinar. It was a person I didn't see very often, but from time to time I would come into contact with him. And Fred did communicate verbally, but I had a difficulty understanding what he was trying to say. And what really hit home to me after several conversations with Fred is that I was the one who had a deficit. I was the one who was having difficulty. You know, Fred knew what he was saying. The DSPs who had worked with him, you know, for many years understood him. His family understood him. I was the one that was having trouble. And it was funny because, you know, I might like to think that as a professional, I'm being really, really patient with Fred. But as he would repeat himself, it was pretty clear he was the one being patient with me, and my lack of understanding. And whenever I figured something out, you know, he'd give me that little pat on the arm or that smile or that thumbs up, and kind of along the lines of, you know, hey, I knew you'd figure it out eventually, you know. Yeah.
That's good. That's a good story.
All right. Well, before we move on to empowerment, did you want to share a communication story, John?
Well, there's so many. One that comes to mind is this is great. I worked for an organization as an administrator, and you know, I wasn't doing direct support for many years. And anyway, I went to visit a person in a group home setting, and this person had a diagnosis of autism, and they communicated. Well, let's call this person Leo. So Leo communicated. He rubbed his nose a lot with one hand, and he would rub his nose a lot for whatever reason, whether it's some kind of stimulation or whatever it was. But when he was happy and content, you know, he would rub his nose and with one hand. But the direct support professionals that knew him for years and years and years, you know, when Leo had when he was unhappy, he would rub his nose with both hands. And if Leo was rubbing his nose with both hands, it was you know, you needed to really back off and kind of give Leo his space and so forth. But I was visiting one day, and I wanted to say hello to Leo because I saw him around, and you know, and so, but he was rubbing his nose with both hands, and I didn't know Leo that well. And I wasn't communicating with him, obviously, every day like the direct support professionals were. So I was going to hang out with Leo and get a cup of coffee or whatever. And the direct support professional said, John, no. You need to back off a little bit, okay? I wouldn't really, I think Leo needs some space. And so of course, I listened, okay, cool. And they told me all about Leo's, talk about adapting to and recognizing the range of communication styles of participants or people we're supporting. These direct support professionals got it, and they showed me and helped me help Leo have a good afternoon. Because if I went and hung out with Leo, it probably wouldn't have been good. He would have not had a good day. So there's my story about communication.
Perfect illustration. I mean, about how important communication is.
Yeah.
All right. Well, once we have established a mode of communication, once we are understanding what the people around us are telling us, either their words or through their actions, through their facial expressions, through their use of eye contact, once we have that communication established, then it comes down to, how responsive are we going to be to that communication? Are we going to be making adjustments based on what we're seeing and hearing from the people we're supporting? And that gets us into the realm of empowerment. DSPs don't always think about it this way, but they have a tremendous amount of power over the lives of the people they're supporting. And they have an opportunity to give that power back to the people they're supporting and really, again, develop that collaborative relationship we talked about earlier.
Absolutely.
To ask questions, to provide options, to support informed decision making.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And I'm just thinking of, again, I'm going kind of back a few years, few decades, when we talk about that power, right? That staff members have power over, and it's true. And I don't want this to offend anybody listening or watching, but we do. We have power. Doesn't mean that the people we support don't have their own source of power. They do. Everybody can be empowered. But in our system, back in the institutions, and even back, my goodness, even now, if you look at keys, the notion of keys and people having keys to their own room or their home, we have federal legislation now and the community settings rule that talks about keys, and people with intellectual disabilities should have keys to their own room. And it seems like we take it for granted, but the notion of a key and a lock for your own space is something that we have to be kind of reminded of, because the fact is, people historically, they were kind of kept, they were sometimes even locked in locked places. So just the notion of key, and not to mention keys being a symbol of violence and power, and very, very negative power. I have plenty of stories and people that have lived in institutions talk about, how keys were used to hurt them and whatever. But I just that word power that you said, that we have power over, it's something we have to really be cognizant of.
Yeah, I mean, it can be as simple as starting if you're working during the day, coming in the morning and saying, here's what we're going to be doing today, versus saying, what would you like to do today?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And so I think we'll talk about it in a little bit, but our system kind of interferes with that. We'll get to that in a second.
So this is the NADSP competency area for participant empowerment. It's area 1. The direct support professional enhances the ability of a participant to lead a self-determining life by providing the support and information necessary to build self-esteem and assertiveness and to make decisions. And I think it's important to acknowledge that takes time and that takes effort. And often in our system, DSPs may feel that they don't have that time, that there's too much on the schedule, there's too much that needs to be done to set aside the time to help someone through a decision-making process, to ask those important questions. And let's face it, sometimes DSPs are just physically exhausted. I mean, this may not be their only job. Even if it is their only job, it takes a lot of physical exertion and mental and emotional exertion as well. And to make that effort, again, to help someone through a process over several minutes, when, in 1 second you could make a decision for a person.
Yeah.
Maybe a decision that you felt very comfortable with.
Without a doubt. Dan, I'm thinking a lot of people that I used to work with and knew that lived in institutional settings, and then moved, from the 70s and 80s, and then they would move into a group home setting. It was permission for everything. Can I use the bathroom? Can I get a soda? May I? And that, talk about being, I guess, disempowered. But I mean, this would go on for years. And in fact, in some of some of the folks, some of their plans, it would be, no, you don't have to ask permission, and it would be a clear directive in their plan that if they asked permission for something, we would counter. No, you don't have to ask permission to go to the bathroom. You can go whenever you want. So there's a reason that this is a competency for direct support professionals, because it's so embedded in, I think, what has happened historically to people with disabilities. So it's a vital skill to have.
Absolutely. Here's a couple of the skill statements from that competency. Again, not a complete list, but the competent DSP assists and supports a participant to develop strategies, make informed choices, follow through on responsibilities, and to take risks. That's another area that's just loaded with potential, the right to take risks.
Yeah.
And the competent DSP promotes participant partnership. There we go. We had collaborative relationship earlier. Now we have participant partnership in the design of support services, consulting the person and involving him or her in the support process. So again, what are we going to have for dinner tonight? What's on the agenda for today? What time do you want to go to bed? These are all things that we should not be deciding for people. We should be talking to people, communicating with people, and involving them in these decisions and helping them to make informed choices about these aspects of their life.
And I'm thinking most direct support professionals that are probably listening, and myself included, it's scary to help people take risks. It's scary, I think, sometimes to hand over that power. That because we don't want anybody to get hurt. We don't want anybody to take a risk and have something bad happen. But the reality is, the other side of that is that that's how you learn things. You make mistakes. And you take a risk, you make a mistake, and you learn, and you don't touch the hot pan again, or whatever it might be. That's hard. That's a hard muscle to build, and I think it's just an ongoing kind of competency to grow into as a direct support professional.
Yeah, and I think, even for things that are less intense than taking a risk. There's comfort for DSPs in routine, and something as simple as it's Tuesday, so we're going to have macaroni for dinner tonight. Yeah. That kind of creates a little bit of order. Yeah. It helps the DSP plan ahead. Yeah.
And think about, I'm sorry, Dan, not to interrupt. Think about it. We have, again, back to the system. And again, I'm not here to criticize the system that we're in. But it is, a lot of DSPs have to follow menus.
Right.
And if somebody that they're supporting doesn't want to eat what's on the menu, then they have to actually log in a substitution in a logbook somewhere. So it makes it hard to kind of be free as a direct support professional to promote this. So we hear your pain, direct support professionals. We feel it, and how difficult it can be to actually live up to this. But you got to strive for it hard.
Yeah, and we'll probably get into advocacy in a future webinar, and that'll play a role there as well. All right, and then just a few items from our code of ethics. That sort of relate to this. In that Venn diagram earlier, we had the knowledge, skills, and values, and we've really been focusing on the skills in these webinars, but the values certainly overlap as well. The code of ethics is our written description of the values of our profession. So the code of ethics, just a few pull quotes from the code of ethics. DSPs promote the use of language that is respectful, sensitive, and contemporary. So we've talked a lot about understanding the communication of the people we support. There's also, of course, the communication that DSPs use, how they communicate, whether that's through documentation, whether that's through spoken communication, whether that's through our facial expressions and our body language.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
What I'm thinking of that first bullet there, Dan, is that I've worked with people that have supported that had pretty vibrant language. They cussed, they swore, Did that mean that I should, swear with them? No. I think that's an ethical choice. And I mean, I think most direct support professionals are, they need to be mindful of their language. But to go along when somebody's cussing and swearing and cuss and swear with them like you're at the bar, that's not something we can say that's an ethical behavior,
Yeah, and even just our professional language, right? That's something that changes over time. The expectations change over time.
Exactly.
The terminology that I used when I first started in this field is not the same vocabulary I use professionally today.
Exactly.
And DSPs have to follow those changes and adapt to those changes. So that's the contemporary portion of that item. All right, we honor the personality, preferences, culture, and gifts of people who cannot speak by seeking other ways of understanding them. And again, I think it's important to acknowledge that takes effort, and that takes time. It's not something you're going to be able to do the first day you work with someone.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something you're going to work at, and you're going to develop those channels of communication, because it's important to understand what's being broadcast to us, right? Everyone is communicating, everyone is broadcasting. Just like with me and Fred, the difference is, are we receiving those messages?
Yep, absolutely.
And similarly, in another tenet of the code, there's a similar item that says we represent the best interest of people who cannot speak for themselves by partnering with the individual and their support team to gather information and find alternative means of expression. So there's, in some cases, it's the direct support professional's role to help people to express themselves, to teach something like American Sign Language, or the use of a picture exchange communication system.
Yep, exactly. And I'm thinking, if anybody's familiar with Seinfeld, there was an episode. There's been a couple episodes that featured people that are close talkers, and comedians talk about close talkers, and there are close talkers out there. There are people that kind of don't necessarily understand personal space. Whether you have a disability or not, there are those people out there. But there are some people with disabilities where, in fact, the nature of the disability is that personal space is not understood. Whether it's a neurological thing or even a psychiatric or psychological thing, sometimes if you're supporting somebody that doesn't understand that, you need to help them find an alternative means of communicating as that direct support professional, because that can be perceived as a deviant behavior, or something that might not win you friends and win you a place in the community. So we talk about the ethics. Does a person have a right to be a close talker? I suppose, but we also have an obligation to help with the quote unquote mores and norms of society. So it's a hard job, Dan.
It is. It absolutely is. Oh, and I guess we should highlight that for direct support professionals who have developed these skills, NADSP's new eBadge Academy has badges tied to some of the things we've been talking about today. There is a badge called Communication Modes that can be earned by direct support professionals who can provide an example of helping someone to establish a channel of communication, as we've talked about. There is a badge for respectful communication, which is all about how the direct support professional communicates themselves and expresses themselves respectfully. We have a wonderful badge called Advocate With. That it really is all about a collaborative relationship, a partnership, that we want to move away from the idea that we advocate for the people we support, and really embrace the idea that we're advocating with them, in partnership with them. And then participant directed, again, very tied to empowerment and to communication. This is a badge that is earned for an example where you are taking direction from the person that you're supporting. And I guess I'll just tell one story about that. When we were piloting the eBadge Academy, we got this wonderful submission for the participant-directed badge from a direct support professional who took the name of the badge very literally, and talked about she was called to cover in a location she didn't normally work, and she knew one of her responsibilities that evening would be to take people to a social event at their church. And this was a house she hadn't worked at before, the church which she was unfamiliar with, and she did what a lot of us would do, pulled out her phone to get directions for how to drive to the church. But one of the people that she was supporting said, "Put that away. You don't need that. I'll let you know how to get there." And I think in a really wonderful act of bravery, that DSP put their phone away and listened to the person she was supporting, turned left when they said turn left, and turned right when they said turn right. And you could tell, this was an audio recording that was submitted, you could kind of tell there was a little bit of anxiety about were they really going to end up where they were supposed to be. But sure enough, they did. They arrived safely at the church, and I think in the process showed a lot of respect for that person.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a terrific story. I love that. And that person got the badge, right?
And they got the badge.
Yeah. Wow, that's so good.
All right. Well, that we've reached the end of our slideshow, John.
Yep. I guess lunch is over.
Lunch is over. Hope everyone has managed to finish their lunch.
It's great. And thank you, Dan, and on behalf of the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals, please tune in to our next Lunch and Learn. Just look for it on our website or Facebook or whatever. You can reach out to us certainly at those addresses on the screen, and check out our website, and certainly check out the badges, and just keep checking us out. And I hope you have a nice afternoon.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
John.
Yes. There we go.